this time. Okay, folks, we're going to call this meeting to order. Let us stand for a flag salute.
Councilmember Redmond.
Here.
Councilmember Stacklet.
Here.
Councilmember Stern. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Kluwer. Here. Mayor Collins.
Here. And we're going to have a special presentation. There's a presentation before I read the proclamation, or it's just is the proclamation? Okay. Well, this is from the first five folks that are focused on children and families, and April of this year is the Siskiyou Child Abuse Prevention Council Collaborative Proclamation. Whereas children are vital to Siskiyou County's future, prosperity, and quality of life, and whereas all children deserve to live in safe, stable, nurturing homes and communities, whereas families, educators, and community members are key to foster children's healthy growth and development, whereas research has shown the enormous impact that positive parenting practices can have on a child's social, emotional, and intellectual development, and whereas the purpose of the Week of the Young Child is to focus public attention on the needs of young children and their families, to recognize their early childhood programs and services that meet those needs with a celebration of early learning young children, their teachers, families, and communities. Whereas child abuse and neglect prevention is a community responsibility, affecting both the current and future quality of life of a community. Whereas rape, sexual assault, and sexual harassment impact our society, as seen by statistics indicating that 1 in 5 women and 1 in 67 men will be raped at some point in their lives. Whereas sexual assault impacts children, adults, and the community at large, and whereas effective child abuse and sexual assault prevention succeed because of partnerships amongst citizens, agencies, schools, faith communities, healthcare providers, civic organizations, law enforcement, and the business community. Whereas communities that understand the importance of prevention and support for the well-being of citizens thrive and prosper. Whereas with leadership, dedication, and encouragement, there is evidence that we can be successful in preventing child abuse and sexual violence in Siskiyou County. Therefore, we hereby proclaim April as Child Abuse Prevention and Sexual Assault Awareness Month, as well as April 2nd through the 8th, 2022, as Week of the Young Child, and call upon all citizens, community agencies, faith groups, medical facilities, elected leaders, and businesses to increase their participation in efforts to support families, thereby preventing child abuse and strengthening families in the community in which we live. It's a lot to think about. Thank you. We're going to move on to public comment. Kathy, we have anybody in live, or not quite sure how to do that in this new world?
If this correctly, we have no remote commenters. Non-agenda items.
This thing is, well, I think that's mine.
Hi, I'm Paul Beck. I just wanted to come before you guys. I realize I committed a faux pas at the last Planning Commission meeting regarding staff comments, and I want to just impress upon you guys, and I'm sure this is no mystery to any of you, we're in a high fire danger season this year. I mean, it's looking really badly. So I just urge City Council maybe to open a dialogue with planning, Siskiyou, CAL FIRE, city fire department, police department. I think it was 2 years ago, we had a public awareness, I'm not sure what you call it, seminar over in the other building over here. And I just want to implore you guys, let's not wait till June or July to start having a discussion about this. Let's do it now, because we need to be in a state of preparedness. And maybe this is something we could do every 2 years, is, hit it hard with advertising in the paper, radio, TV, whatever we can afford, or whatever is at our disposal to use, and really reach out to the citizens of the city and the surrounding areas on what to do should we encounter wildfire. Because, it came pretty close here last year. Just the wind shift would have made all the difference. So just please, let's all get ready and open a dialogue with each other, okay? That's all, and I thank you for your time.
Thanks, Paul. Anybody else? Online, Kathy?
I'm not seeing any remote commenters.
Pardon everybody, we're still working out a few little details on this new system. Hopefully I will not be as popping as I was with this windscreen. Well, let's, if that's all for public comment, we're going to move it for, do you want to come up, Karen?
Thank you. Sorry, I tried to join you by Zoom and had technical difficulties myself. So, can you hear me okay? If we haven't met, I'm Karen Potts, and I'm the First Five Siskiyou Children and Families Commission Director for Siskiyou County. And we were just newly invited to be the local Child Abuse Prevention Council. I want to thank you so much for adopting the proclamation today, and would really invite you to join us, not just in April for Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Month, but throughout the year in doing small things as a community to make life a little bit more successful for the children in our community. We know in our county the most prevalent type of abuse is neglect, and neglect is preventable, right? If it takes everyone in the community to help all children succeed. And what we're really interested about as a Child Abuse Prevention Council is not only supporting the children whose families have had difficult beginnings, who struggle with supporting children, but also to be that resource to all families to be successful. From families like Tessa that I know, that imagine if somebody just cooked some dinner for Tessa and dropped it off, or bought the Tuesday night meal for Tessa's families, because she does this in our community. That's our vision, to get everyone in the community to show care, not just for our seniors, but also for our seniors and for the children in our communities who are the most vulnerable. Thank you for the opportunity. We do have some yard signs and all kinds of great resources. If anybody is interested, I'd love to connect with city staff, to city manager, if we haven't met yet, to share some resources and information with you about what's available this year around child abuse prevention, and then work together as we are with many other communities to make children a priority in your city's priority activities. So children and families, of course. Thank you. Thanks for always welcoming us.
Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Karen.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, if that's enough for public comment, let's move to staff and council comments. And Todd, you want to lead us off there?
Yeah. So just a couple things for the community. Got contacted by Pat Power today. They're, as you know, doing ongoing wildfire mitigation work. And on April 24th, between 1 and 3 a.m., they're going to be routing traffic from I-5 through the city so they can get at removing brush and other, fuel along that break. So just that to keep in mind. You notice on the consent agenda, there are a couple of agreements that are renewals that have been, they've been outdated since about 2018. Another one will be coming, it's with the Humane Society. They've got some changes that they want to it. We've agreed in principle, it's sitting with their attorney, and so we should have it back by the next meeting. So the other piece, again, this is early and it's just verbal, but we met with the Crystal Geyser folks, the new owners, and they are willing, they would like to enter into a development agreement. It's a little bit early in the process, and it depends on the type of development agreement they're talking about. There's a development agreement that focuses more on planning expectations and expectations from the community that we've got to be very careful about and overpromising and then getting ourselves into a pickle. And then there's a development agreement that gets down to the nitty-gritty of things like, all right, if you do this, we might be able to, forego, in increment, and a whole host of things that we can discuss at some point. But the bottom line is they are in agreement to annex into the city, and on the face of it, they are willing to work with us on property that we need that's at the right elevation in the city for our water tank, which is good news. And, I don't want to speak out of turn, but in initial discussions, it sounds like it is possibly a donation situation. So finally, there is, we received RFP on the stormwater utility rate study. It is, we've taken a look at it. It's really solid. I'm going to award tomorrow and get on with that work. Yeah, more to come. But that's just kind of the gist of the things that are in process.
Anybody else on staff? Counselors? Comments, questions?
I guess just, Todd, can you expand a little bit on the RFP for the stormwater master plan?
So it is looking for ways that we pay for failing stormwater infrastructure in town. This firm has done extensive work, including last year with Shasta Lake, where they were facing a 30% increase in their water rates because they were having to have water trucked in because of drought conditions. And this company worked with them to figure out a way to kind of move the increase out over time, and they came up with some pretty interesting mechanisms on how to pay for it, and they have a long track record of doing just this in many locations, and they have an extremely solid resume with 20 plus years of experience. So I'm very happy. We got one response, and I'm glad that it was this response.
Todd, any update on Public Works Director?
Yes. So we had a really solid candidate once again. We had time set up last Friday to bring him in to walk the field to see what kind of thinking he could do on the spot in terms of problem solving. He called me Thursday morning afternoon to say that he's working for PG down in Reading right now. He got to looking at home prices up here, and then PG turned around and gave him a raise, so he bowed out. So we're back to square one, and we'll be reposting that. We'll find somebody. It's just, it's somebody that has to want to be here, because, we're by far not the highest paying, even with the revamping of the position. But we'll find the right person. It just, let's hang tight.
Any others? If not, Todd, I'm going to ask you to continue on to committee reports.
Yes, the DIAC committee was scheduled to meet last week, and there was not a quorum, so we put it off to this week. And Nyan has stepped away from it after being appointed. Apparently, there some health crisis in the family. And we have notes on the beautification committee in here, which I wasn't at, and to be fair, I haven't had a look at it. Other than, the ultimate result from the beautification committee is that list of things that they would like to see improved and the city to consider for next year's budget, and what can we do now that we'll be hitting later in the agenda.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the consent agenda. City manager recommends approval of the following consent agenda items. All resolutions and ordinances on this agenda or added hereto shall be introduced or adopted as applicable by title only, and the full reading thereof is hereby waived. A, approval of minutes, February 28th, 2022, regular and special city council meetings, March 4th, 2022, special city council meeting. B, approval of disbursements, accounts payable, February 28th, March 9th, March 15th, 2022, total gross payroll and taxes from the period ending February 20th, 2022. C, committee minutes, committee minutes, beautification committee, November 10th, 2021, and February 23rd, 2022. Downtown Enhancement Advisory Committee, January 26th, and the Planning Commission, February 15th, 2022. D, the Police Department report, February 22. E, the second reading and adoption of ordinance CCO
22-02.
22-02, an ordinance of the City of Mount Shasta adding Chapter 7.70 to the Municipal Code regulating abandoned and distressed real property. F, letter of support for Mountain Runners annual 4th of July walk run. G, approval of CCR-22-06, approving Section 706 of the Mount Shasta Police Department Policy Manual. H, renewal of the mutual aid contract with Siskiyou County for roadway repairs. I, renewal of mutual aid agreement with the City of Weed for fire protection. And finally, J, the monthly investment report, February 2022. Is there any parts of this that anybody like to call out and cover separately?
Yes, I would request that we remove 7G from the consent agenda and discuss that after consideration of agenda item number 10, having to do with the military equipment ordinance.
Anybody else feel like that?
That's it.
It doesn't require a second.
It doesn't require a second. Never mind.
Thank you. And in terms of 7C, I'd ask that there be a correction in the DIAC minutes, which indicate, the DIAC minutes indicate that the term for DIAC members is 5 years. Actually, it is 4 years. So I'd ask, that may be a typo, I'd ask that that be corrected. With that amendment to the DIAC minutes, I would ask for approval of agenda items 7A, B, C, D, E, F, H, I, and J.
By title only.
By title only, yes.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So So we'll go to agenda item number 8, which is the public hearing, the extension of an urgency ordinance, CCO-22-01, the short-term rental memoriam. Teresa, would you be so kind as to introduce that to us, please?
I'm Teresa Spade. I'm the city planner, and I am asking for you to consider extension of the short-term rental license moratorium that went in effect on February 14th, 2022. This was initially approved as a 45-day urgency ordinance moratorium on the issuance of new short-term rental business licenses associated with residential homes in all zoning districts. The interim moratorium does not affect commercial use short-term rentals such as motels, hotels, or bed and breakfasts, and does not affect the renewal of existing short-term rentals being continued under the same ownership. The extension would essentially extend the moratorium for an additional 10 months and 15 days. And the new expiration date of the moratorium would then be February 15th, 2023. I would hope that we could bring the item back as a new short-term rental ordinance before that date. I'm hoping within the next 3-4 months to be able to come before the approval body with a short-term rental ordinance for consideration, and at the time of approval of the short-term rental ordinance, I would hope that we could end the moratorium. The reasons that the moratorium has been placed in effect is due to health and safety concerns, both for immediate neighborhoods of short-term rentals and also concerns associated with the long-term housing shortage, and concerns that the significant rise in short-term rental of residential homes has contributed to housing shortage and increasing costs in rental housing, which can displace low and moderate income workers and result in hardships for those people that work in the city of Mount Shasta but can no longer afford to live here. The city staff continues to work with Granicus, who has been working to get the code enforcement system and the tracking system online, and we're expecting to see that happen very soon. The moratorium is not considered a project under the California Environmental Quality Act, and staff recommends a motion to approve the 10-month and 15-day extension of the urgency ordinance number CCO 2201, which is titled an interim urgency ordinance of the City Council of the City of Mount Shasta establishing a moratorium on the issuance of new short-term rental business licenses within city limits pending further study and adoption of final regulatory standards.
Thank you, Teresa. Kathy, did we open up a public hearing on this?
Yes, by clarifying questions. Clarifying questions first.
Well, let's open up a public hearing and see if there is anybody who would like to speak on this. Just please give us your name and where you're from.
Good evening. I'm Sandra Haugen. I am the broker and owner of Elite Real Estate in town. So I just have a few quick things to say. The number one complaint that was also just brought up that I've heard around this moratorium is that there are not enough long-term rentals in this town. As a broker and a property manager of over 300 long-term and short-term licensed vacation rentals, I can tell you that the vacation rentals that I manage would never be available on the long-term market. And the reason for that is because all of my owners use them. They use them for their clients. They use them for themselves. So you're taking away funds from the community that would never make a rental available for somebody. I can also verify, managing so many rentals, that my rents have not fluctuated much in the last 3 to 5 years. They have stayed steady, and very rarely do I raise rents at all. A significant part of our economy is built on vacationers. A balance is what is needed to be found, because a balance means growth. If you put a stop to vacation rentals in zoning where it has been allowed, it will stop everything. A moratorium stops our community. Briefly looking at the numbers in 2021, these are my numbers from my company. I paid housekeepers over $60,000 to clean these vacation rentals. TOT taxes were over $40,000 that were brought into our county. Local repairmen, contractors, and handyman were paid over $105,000, and $21,000 went to local hardware stores and other community stores, grocery stores, etc. Over President's Weekend, if you guys were here, I personally brought in 60 people just to Mount Shasta in 5 days. Every restaurant was full, every hotel was full. Airbnbs are an affordable family vacation. And I say that because, taking my family, for example, I have 3 teenagers. I have to go get 3 hotel rooms if I'm going to take my family somewhere. And that comes up to about $600 a night to have 3 hotel rooms. Whereas an Airbnb can host my family for $250 to $300 a night, and then I have a kitchen and I can do other things that allow us to travel. An Airbnb is encouraging building with incentives, because we have a lot of land in this town that we can build affordable housing. So offering incentives to contractors to get people to do that. Talk to us, talk to the local realtors. I'm a very hands-on person. Every neighbor of every one of my Airbnbs has my personal cell phone. If there's ever an issue, they call me. So there's a balance. Working together will help, but the current plan that's on the table to stop all of this is not the answer. It will hurt everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else? Jesse? Hi.
Honorable Mayor, City Councilors, City staff, my name is Jessie Zopfi. I'm the broker-owner of J. Harris Real Estate. I definitely agree with everything Ms. Haugen has said tonight. I do want to say the city manager did make some remark about exhaustively high housing prices right now. If you pay for a median housing priced home in Mount Shasta right now, you will pay about $450,000. Closer. $450,000 for a middle priced home right now. If you're paying at $350,000, you're getting something that's quite a fixer. So at this price, a mortgage is going to be $3,000 a month. It would be very hard to do a long-term rental and charge a tenant $3,000 a month, because they cannot afford that in most cases. Tim, when we were on the city council together back in 2006, I recall there was a big concern at that time with vacant housing. I think 33% of the homes in the sphere of influence and the city were vacant because it was second homes for people. At the time, they were not used as long-term rentals. They still won't be, because, as Sandra said, people will come up here to use their properties. I also do not think commercial should be a part of this. If you consider the homes or duplexes or townhomes in the commercial district that are currently being used, you also then have to consider the businesses which are in houses in the commercial districts. In my 11 years in real estate, I've always been under the assumption that we do have a moratorium on short-term rentals in the city unless you are in C1 or C2. I don't have buyers wanting to do that unless they are in those districts. So I think you're sort of rehashing this. I'd also like to say the idea of health and safety issues come up quite often, and I really don't think this is the case. A short-term rental is managed effectively, it's kept clean, people watch over it, the yards are cared for, whereas an abandoned or half-used home is often neglected, the yard needs to be maintained. So it also, as Sandra has said, creates livelihood for a number of people who help out maintaining the homes. I'm not saying that I want all of the houses in Mount Shasta to be considered for short-term rentals, but I do think that in R3, 4, and in the commercial zones, it should not even be on the table for a conversation. As far as parties go, everybody throws parties. It's not just vacationers from somewhere else. It's college students, it's families getting together. This is not an issue. I thank you for listening to me. I see my time is up, and that is very intimidating.
Thank you, Jesse. I didn't know that thing was on behind us as well. I imagine it is. Please come up. Can I have just your name and where you're from, please?
Gigi Ryan. I'm a realtor for 21 years here, and I more want to talk about a hands-on experience of what your moratorium, I guess the easiest way to explain it is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I waited 15 years to buy a legal zoned property to turn it into a vacation rental, Airbnb, what you have. It's at 220 North Mount Shasta Boulevard. It's 2 doors down from the main intersection of Mount Shasta Boulevard and Lake. My husband and I bought the property. It was used by an owner maybe once a year or less. They'd owned it for 27 years. It looked like it. We bought it, spent a year and a half and $150,000 bringing that house up to standards that we felt was a benefit to both the city and our guests. We personally manage it. We don't manage any others. I've always told people that when you're looking for a vacation rental, go to look at the rules, and these are the zoning, and this is the area. We greet our guests now that COVID's over again and make sure they have everything they need. We give them lists of all of the local restaurants, the places to come, like the water at the park, and so they can really get a full value of Mount Shasta and its area. And the plan is, we thoroughly love doing it, and we're very busy and we're very highly rated. It's 5 bedroom, 3 bath. I don't know too many people who could live in that as a simple residential unit for 5 bedrooms and 3 baths with a tiny little old 1-car garage and a courtyard in the back. So that it doesn't work. So the house is well situated and is doing more good for the city this way. But what you've done is you've taken away our ability to turn it over to somebody else and let them have the benefits, and the people have the benefits the same as we do. So I just ask that you maybe take a closer look on your zoning and determine whether or not my house at 220 would fit as a residence only. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Gigi.
Good evening. I'm Eric Olson. My wife and I reside and own short-term rentals here in the city of Mount Shasta. It seems like the moratorium has cast a pretty wide net. And I say that because the 2 residences, the 2 structures that we, for us, have put a significant investment into to keep them, make them a nice place to stay as a short-term rental, are commercially zoned. So anyone who owns commercially zoned property under this moratorium are limited as we are, should we want to sell the property, because it can't be used by the future owners or potential owner anymore as a short-term rental. So for us, it devalues the property. If the city wants to, if part of this is to increase available housing, why must commercial property owners suffer a loss? Is the city pursuing other methods that don't hurt existing property owners? Existing commercial property owners suffer a loss due to the ordinance for residential that seems better suited for residential neighborhoods. I understand that. I spoke at the county planning commission about a structure on our street, which is a hybrid street, if you will. One half is county, one half is city of Mount Shasta. And that's not unique within the city. So that's not addressed, and I don't know if it's within the jurisdiction of the city, short of annexing property, right? Like we're going to do that, where this inequality exists between what a county property owner can do with their property and what a city of Mount Shasta property owner can do. So please consider commercial property owners of short-term rentals. They're not located solely in residential neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? And Kathy, do we have anybody online?
No remote commenters.
No. Well, let me close the public hearing, and you're going to have to help me. Is this?
Bring it back to council for discussion.
Well, no, but can we ask questions of Teresa? I know that was earlier. Questions, Tim?
I just wanted to clarify that this isn't taking away anything that has been established as a short-term rental. It's prohibiting the future new ones for a moment in time so that we can develop a better plan. Is that correct?
That is mostly correct, but the issue that several people have brought up is valid, which is that the way that our business licenses work, and the short-term rentals are governed by the business licenses, is that they run with the property owner, not with the land. And so when I talked to staff about how this would work, they indicated that because of that, we would not be able to, if they sold the property, then they would not be able to transfer, just based on the way that things currently are running. I think that it is perfectly feasible to have a policy established by memorandum that says that if someone currently has a business license for a short-term rental, that they do have the authority to transfer that during sale, during the moratorium. I think that that is a reasonable way to interpret things if that was something that you were interested in looking at.
I had the same questions. Just trying to bear with me. Just trying to make sure I understand what this is. That this is not prohibiting anybody who currently has a license from continuing to rent their property during the moratorium.
That's correct.
And residential or commercial, is that correct?
That's correct.
So second, I understand that currently, as it's written, somebody couldn't sell their property to a new owner, but that's something you brought up that we might address through some type of memorandum. That's probably not something we can move Kathy forward here because it had to be an agendized item, I'm assuming. Any other questions then? Oh, thank you, Teresa.
Well, yeah, I do. So through the chair. Teresa, is there any way to speed up the process to maybe cut down the amount of time to come up with a final ordinance regarding short-term rentals?
Sure. So the thing that I've been waiting for is the data from Granicus. What we could do is we can present a draft ordinance and then take comments on that and also incorporate data after the draft is presented. That way we can at least get a draft out there for consideration. So that's one way that we can shorten comments. In terms of a memorandum, I believe that what I'm thinking of is just sort of a staff policy. It's not something that necessarily needs to be agendized because you're not changing any rules. It would just be changing an interpretation of the way that things are done.
Anything else, John? No. Anybody want to make a motion?
Pardon? Why don't we have discussion first? Yeah, I am going to support extending the moratorium for maximum period of time of 10 months, 15 days, understanding that we might very well have a new proposed ordinance before us in 3 or 4 months. But at least that gives you the time to get it done with whatever unforeseen circumstances come up. In doing so, it's my understanding that we have approved about 51 short-term licenses in the city. We also have, we believe, 20 or more unlicensed short-term rentals operating in the city at the current time. The extension of the moratorium for new licenses, and that's what this is a moratorium for new licenses, does not prohibit any of the existing licensees from continuing to operate until we adopt our new ordinance. And I think that the comments that we received tonight are important, good comments that we can take into consideration in both the drafting and consideration of the new ordinance. With that, if there's not further discussion, I will make a motion to approve the extension of urgency ordinance CCO-22-01 short-term rental moratorium as requested and recommended by staff. Do I need a further description of that?
By title only.
Very well, by title only.
So can I ask a clarifying question before you guys go on? If you are, say, you are an owner of a short-term rental now, and during the moratorium, you wanted to pass that to another party, it's not a net increase in short-term rentals. Is that something that you guys are willing to consider?
It's not before the council now, but I would invite staff to bring something back to us.
Okay.
I'll second the motion on the table.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Agenda item number 9, the public hearing on electric vehicle charging station ordinance. City Planner Teresa Spade, would you introduce this, please?
Yes. So, again, this is Teresa Spade, the city planner, and the item before you is a new ordinance. It's the electric vehicle charging systems ordinance. It will be located in the section of the municipal code that discusses building permit type things. So that's where you would find the parking requirements. So the intent of this code, it comes from the state, and it's a state requirement to make it easier and streamline permitting for electric vehicle charging systems. And so that's basically the intent of it. And most of the ordinance that's before you is just cut and paste and is in many jurisdictions in California, and it's almost the same exact wording. There is a little section in the back that discusses appeal processes and permit processes. Let's see here. So it's the permit review requirements. And the reason that that section is in there is because that part of the municipal code doesn't really have this type of a section, which is a necessary part of this overall state mandated requirement. So there's sort of an addition that applies to all of the building part of the municipal code, in addition to this part that applies specifically to the electric vehicle charging systems. Yeah, that's it in essence.
Thank you. Folks, any councilors, any clarifying questions?
Just for clarification, so the 15.76 hearings and appeals chapter would apply to all of the planning commission actions. Is that?
It is specifically, really, it kind of refers to the actions that are in that chapter of the municipal code. So it allows for the building official to be recognized in terms of having some authority in that realm, whereas there aren't really any other sections of the municipal code that refer to the building official at all with regard to things like appeals and use permits. And so the intent of that is to apply specifically to that chapter of the municipal code having to do with the building, a building official and building codes.
But, the bottom line is it's just bringing us into compliance with state law. It's just bringing us into compliance with state law.
I'm wondering whether it should, and maybe it does, and I just didn't catch it, okay, I guess under, to restate that, is 15.76, this section for the appeals, clear that it only applies to 15.76 chapter of the ordinance, of the municipal code?
Give me just 1 minute to find this 15.76 that you speak of.
And one way of doing that might be in 15.76.030, after the first phrase of subsection A would be to add the additional phrase, something like taken under this chapter or taken within 15.76.
So this section of code, I believe, has some consistency with state law as well as other sections of code relative to just general appeal processes. And it helps to clarify how it applies within this chapter.
If the intent of okay. So, I am not clear. 15.76.010 through .30.1 is a new chapter, is that correct?
It is a new chapter.
And it's intended to only refer to certain planning commission actions?
Yes, so it says, you'll see on line A, it says required under terms of this title shall be, so that refers back to this section of code.
To
or
Title
this section
15.
of the chapter of the ordinance.
Okay, I see. All right. That's fine.
Tim, you good?
I think that, so Title 15 is, this will apply to any actions taken within Title 15.
Yes.
Okay, I'm satisfied with that. Good.
We'll open up the public hearing. And is anybody present who would like to speak on this topic? Kathy or?
Okay, so let me interject here. Side note. So someone has texted me saying that they're trying to enter through Zoom to comment, and it's not connecting. So I don't know if it's an individual circumstance or something broader. No, I don't. They just said it's not working. I won't mention any names.
We currently have 4 folks on YouTube watching,
Okay.
and it doesn't look like there's anybody that's entered through the public comment portal.
Okay, so they have to go through the public comment portal. Okay.
They wish to share.
They could text and it could be read into the record, I guess. It's not
They
perfect.
wish to share comments on YouTube. Jeremy, do you want to step up and speak on this?
Is that possible? Is that acceptable to the city to allow comments via YouTube, via text?
I would hate to start that. Once we start doing that, we're going to have to continue doing that. So I would rather we don't start accepting comments on YouTube. Otherwise, we're going to have to do that moving forward. That's
okay.
my recommendation. Same thing with text.
Right. Got it. Thank you. In that case, we are closing public comment and bringing it back to council for consideration. Any comments?
With the clarification from the city planner, I'm satisfied in moving ordinance CCO-22XX, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Mount Shasta, California, adding Chapter 15.46 electric vehicle charging stations to the City of Mount Shasta Municipal Code to a second reading.
Second that.
All in favor?
Councilmember Stearns, if you could please state by title only.
By title. Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, we're going to move to the first reading of CCO-22-07.
These will not be given a number until the second reading.
Oh, till the second reading, okay. Adding Chapter 2.8 to the Mount Shasta Municipal Code regarding police acquisition and use of military equipment. And Councilmember Stearns, you wanted to also discuss, tell me how you wanted to bring that part from the consent agenda in.
Yes, I thought that we could discuss the military equipment policy after we discuss this agenda item,
Okay.
immediately following.
Got it, okay. Chief, would you introduce this to us, please?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. In September of 2021, California legislation passed Assembly Bill 481, which required all California law enforcement agencies participating in what's known as the 1033 program, that's the acquisition of military equipment, have an ordinance and a policy approved by the local governing board, which in this case would be our city council. The policy would address the use of military equipment and would require council to approve the use policy and the equipment policy on an annual basis. So basically, we have two different sections here, and Councilmember Stearns, when he brought the resolution portion is we have the Mount Shasta policy, which we had the resolution for, which would be City Council adopting the Mount Shasta Police Department use policy. That use policy is incorporated into the ordinance that we're talking about tonight. So the ordinance would require the City Council to approve our use policy. With that use policy is the equipment that the police department currently has. The policy requires the police department, before going out and getting, let's say, an MRAP or, satellite technology, the policy requires that the chief of police under section 706.5 under approval, that requires me to come before the governing board before I can engage in any of the following, which includes requesting any military equipment that's available, acquiring any new military equipment, or any other existing military equipment or facility. So basically what it would say is, we pass the resolution that approves this use policy, which is what the ordinance will do. Now, let's say in the future, I want to get an MRAP for whatever reason. I'm just using that because everybody knows it's the big tank-looking thing. Before I can get that, I have to come before council, and by resolution, you would have to adopt that new policy before I could even acquire that. In the policy, should I fail to do that, the city council would be able to, I got to find the page here on the last few pages of the policy, apologize. So the policy actually says that you as a council could either send it back to me for modification, i.e. you don't like that, you don't like what we have, or you could by resolution say, we're done, give it all of it back. So there's two options there that prevent, the whole purpose of the policy is to prevent law enforcement agencies and the whole part of the law from just going out and doing whatever they want, going out and getting an MRAP or going out and getting satellite drones, and requires that the approval of the governing body. So it's kind of the steps. So first we got to pass a resolution that says that this policy section 7.06 is acceptable. And then we got to pass the ordinance, which says that you're going to follow these rules and regulations. It codifies it in our code that yes, the city does have a municipal code addressing this as required. And yes, that the police department is required to do these steps, which include an annual inventory of the equipment. It requires us to have an annual put out to the public. It's on our website now, 30 days prior, and that any changes has to go before the council here. The other thing that just lost my train of thought for just a second. So
Chief, can I ask you a clarifying?
Yes, go ahead.
So when you have this list, is this a blanket list that, that police departments get, and it's, you are required to bring it to council to approve this list, and then if you wanted something off this list, you need to get council approval, or did you pick the items that are on this list?
No, so attached to the resolution, attached to the policy section, which was covered by the resolution, was the actual inventory of the actual equipment that we have.
Got it.
If we want to change any of that, get rid of something, add something, I would have to come before council, and by resolution, we could change the inventory list. I can't get rid of anything any more than I can accept anything without your approval per this ordinance and policy. So where does the policy come from? Because that could be a question. The policy is written for us by Lexipol, who we pay to, they're a bunch of lawyers that sit around a room and write policy for police departments. And I'm pretty sure that every law enforcement agency, barring the state and the feds, because I don't know what they have, in Siskiyou County, use Lexipol. It's a statewide agency. In fact, being online with the Chiefs Association, we were talking with Sacramento and San Francisco and LA on how to get this, and they're Lexipol companies. So the policy is gone through a bunch of lawyers to sit down on what's the best language to have to minimize any exposure that the city may have and to make it as strong as possible. And to point out that the 706 section, that point 5 of the approval, you'll notice that it has a lot of shalls in there, and in law enforcement, shall means we don't have a choice, we must comply.
Councilmember Stearns, both the policy covered in the consent agenda and the ordinance, which we are doing the first reading on, he covered both parts of these. Do you have questions about either one of them, Roland?
Yes, I do. Thank you. In terms of the proposed, in terms of the proposed ordinance, or the proposed policy, which you just discussed, to me, it's unclear that the city council has to approve the military equipment prior to its acquisition. And I would like to have it clear in the ordinance and in the policy that the city council must approve the specific equipment prior to it being acquired. The way I read the ordinance is once a year, the police department will notify us of the equipment that it has. It submits a report. The ordinance says we approve the ordinance, but it doesn't say we have to approve the equipment in advance of its acquisition. That's my interpretation and my reading. Reasonable people can differ, but I have read an awful lot of ordinances over my years. So I would like to have that additional language put in prior to our acting on this proposed ordinance. When I look at 706.5, it doesn't say that city council gives prior approval to specific acquisition of particular military equipment. When I look at 706.7, it also doesn't tell me that.
Well, Chief, are you going to rebut that or what?
Well,
we're going to have to come back.
I'm going to let him finish, but it does specifically, I'll read specifically under 706.5, the last sentence. The military equipment policy must be approved by the governing body prior to engaging in any of the following. So you got to approve the following before, and that's A through G on page 522 of the policy, before requesting, seeking funds, acquiring military, collaborating, using any new, existing. So each time, so the annual report has to be approved before, the policy has to be approved by resolution before I can do any of that stuff. The second thing, and I'll just go with John Kinney's memorandum, is that yes, it does have to be reviewed annually by City Council. And so how it works and how it's set up is we approve the resolution CCR 2206 tonight, adopting the policy section that we have with the inventory that was provided for you. In a year, we would come back and say, we want to get this. This is our proposed military equipment. That would be the resolution. So we can take it back to John Kinney, but he was pretty clear that the policy sets the guidelines and the ordinance is.
So a year from now, you're going to have a list of things that you may or may not want to acquire that you have to bring before council to get approval for those items.
may or may not, new items, but it also what we currently have, what we've had. We have to, that has to be publicly made to everybody for public comment now. So the equipment that we currently have, and I might point out that on top of that, we've had this program. We're under a yearly audit by the United States government. The feds come in, we have to do physically inventory the equipment. We also have to track and keep the records of that, and they will come up, I believe it's every couple of years, they actually physically come in and review our records, so the tracking equipment's there. If you want there to be a sentence that it has to approve it before, I'm sure that John Kinney will look at it. It's my opinion that that is not necessary, as it's covered in the policy section before I can do anything. I mean, I would literally be in violation of policy if I went out and bought something without approval, and violation of state law.
Well, the ordinance controls, and then the policy follows the ordinance. In the policy that we have in our packet, it doesn't say the equipment is limited to what's attached. It simply has an attachment, and the attachment says the equipment that we currently have are the following. But the policy doesn't indicate that City Council shall approve the equipment in advance of its acquisition, nor does it indicate that the only equipment that the city is approving are those items that are attached to 706 policy. So that's one thing. Another thing, another concern I have is under the definition of 2.80.020C. The definition of police department, I think, is too broad. It includes outside contractors, for example. In 2.80.030 sub 1, I disagree with the language that's in there.
I'm sorry, one more time on that section.
2.80.030 sub 1. And if we need be, I'll go to that.
I think we lost your mic. But I would point out that that language is specifically in AB 481.
Okay, police department. Definition of police department means any division, section, bureau, employee, volunteer, and/or contractor of the Mount Shasta Police Department.
So if I have a reserve officer, or we have an outside contractor that came in to work on, let's say we needed a gun repaired, we had to ship it off or something like that, that's what the police department for contractors would be. I have non-sworn officers, you know, reserves that would work there. If you tell me what language, I'll take it back to John Kinney. Again, the purpose of this is so that we comply with the language that's in AB 481, and those are the definitions that was given to us through 481, and these are the definitions that have been used.
To the chair.
Well, presumably definitions can't be broader than what you're talking about, but could be narrower. I would not be supportive of including contractor of the Mount Shasta Police Department within the definition of police department.
So my question for you is, what kind of time constraints? Do you have a due date for this?
No, we're good. We have to be, by law, we had to be going and getting something in front of council before May of 2022. We have met that compliance. So if we need to take the suggestions and give it back to John Kinney, that's not a problem. We have now met our requirements under AB 481 as far as when it had to be before council.
So why don't we do this and table this? We've got copious notes, and have John respond to this either in clarification or in the form of a memo outlining, if there are changes made, make those changes if he's sticking to his guns, why that is.
So my understanding, just so I'm clear, we go into, we want a section added to the ordinance that says that something along the lines of prior to any acquisition of any military equipment, approval must first be sought through council. Is that correct?
Well, I didn't get through all my notes, but I'll tell you what I can do is I can submit my notes to staff.
Sure, yeah.
And
If I'm correct, it seems like we want to be on the same page. There's just some languaging about to make sure we're on the same page. Is that, with the exception of the police?
That was my, can I interject for a moment? That was my question. Is there something about the ordinance that you, like in layman's terms, you are uncomfortable with, or is it the legality of what you're reading compared to your knowledge of how it should be formally stated?
And if I could play on that a little bit further, so I'm trying to get to the nut of this. Is the nut of this the concern that Mount Shasta will be over-militarized in terms of our equipment?
I want to avoid that possibility.
Okay.
I want to have the acquisition of military equipment be determined by the city council because I see that as a policy matter.
Take it back.
I think the ordinance makes it clear that that's what's going to happen. You just don't like the fact that contractors might be involved in the use of the weaponry?
When I've read through the proposed ordinance, it appears to me that there is a report that's made within 12 months after the acquisition of the equipment.
That it would come back to council at that time.
We're informed after the fact. And what I would like to see is council makes that decision, because we do control the budget, we make a decision in advance. But, when we make a budget for various departments, we don't specify how the department can spend that money.
I think then that the wording, I think that the miscommunication here might be that Kenny didn't come back with the wrong verbiage, but you're just wanting a rewrite of the whole.
All right, so excuse me. So my interpretation of this is that the state wants a city ordinance regarding military equipment that it currently has, so that has been reported here. And then it wants subsequent reports yearly on the use of that equipment, or none, possibly.
That is the bottom line.
Yeah, that's of existing equipment. So chief has to report, let's say we're on, we adopt this today, sometime early next year, he has to report on the use of the equipment that we have. The purchase of new equipment is a budgetary item regardless, and I don't read how the PD can go out and buy more equipment without council approval.
So if we're receiving surplus in military equipment, I mean, the bottom line from what I've read is we may have it, but we can't deploy it without council approval. So, and if council says we cannot deploy it, then where do we dispose of it? And that's doable.
So I would appreciate the opportunity to have this come back to council.
Okay.
Do we,
Unless.
Okay, but to what end? It seems to me that with respect to state mandates regarding the reporting of current ownership of equipment and reporting of the use of that is pretty clear to me after reading this.
also, sorry.
If your real intention, Tim, is for us to forego not just the use of, but the ownership of this equipment, then that would be a separate item, so why don't we make that clear?
That is not my purpose. And as I said, it's possible for reasonable people to read the ordinance differently or to read the policy differently. I don't see provision in the, I don't have an objection to a city council of Mount Shasta making a determination that it ought to acquire certain military equipment if the city council deems that appropriate. I do not see this ordinance saying that the city council makes that determination in advance. I also don't see the policy that is to be adopted once the ordinance is adopted, because it makes reference to the ordinance. I don't see that as saying, I don't interpret it the way the chief interprets it, saying that the only equipment that the city can have is what's in the attachment, unless the city council approves other equipment. I just don't see that.
Is the way forward to push this off a meeting, let our city attorney address your concerns in writing, and is that the way forward?
Yeah, I think that the ordinance could be redrafted to meet staff's purpose and my desire to have it clarified so that neither we nor some future city council has, so that it's clear, it's not ambiguous, and so there's not a question as to what is to take place, whether it's by a new city council or by a new chief or by a new city manager.
So again, the way forward to address your concerns is to have our town lawyer look at the policy. We've got the input from you. We're clear.
Well,
Hold on.
Yeah.
And have him either make some changes to the writing, suggest some changes, or verify that, yes, in fact, this does cover what you have said.
What I would
So I think
suggest
we've
is that
got
we
two
accept the
motions.
city manager's suggestion that I submit my notes and comments to the city manager so that staff can confer with council and bring it back to us.
So
I think
okay.
we will
We've
be
got-
get rid of it.
So I
clarified.
think
I
we've
have
got
a
two
comment.
motions on the table here. Is one, who is in agreement that we go back and add this additional language to this ordinance as per Councilman Stearns, or a motion to approve as is? I mean, there really is, like, let's float the first one as per Councilman Stearns, and then the alternate.
Okay, so let's let Tessa speak.
Thank you. It seems to me like we have had our city attorney weigh in on the legal matter. I think we are putting our chief on the spot. I think, Tim, you read it thoroughly and found some points to put our chief on the spot, and I think we should move forward as stated, in my opinion.
I did not read this for the purpose of putting the chief on the spot.
Maybe that wasn't your purpose, but that's certainly what happened. And we already have a city attorney that can make sure that we are in compliance.
Well, do you agree with 2.80.030 sub 1? Which says the military equipment the city council has determined as follows. The military equipment is necessary because there is no reasonable alternative that can achieve the same objective of officer and civilian safety. How many of us want to approve that provision of this ordinance as it currently reads?
I mean, so I want to be careful here. Contractor, there's inference in this. The inference is the contractor is related to law enforcement and isn't a random refrigerator repairman. But do we need that spelled out further?
Okay, so Tim, are you asked, the ordinance reads, and I assume the assumption is that there are circumstances and there is possibility of a circumstance with respect to law enforcement that might be so extreme that military equipment is necessary. Do you acknowledge that that's a possibility?
Yes, absolutely.
Or would you like us to have an emergency meeting to give permission to PD to use the military equipment because it's such an extreme situation? I mean, how detailed do you want the ordinance to be beyond what's there?
We've heard from the police chief that there's been compliance in bringing this before the council prior to May. Is there an urgency to adopt this tonight versus giving the opportunity for further consideration and review to at least allow my questions and comments and concerns to be considered by city staff and legal counsel?
Folks, that sounds like a request to me.
Well, yeah, I guess I really don't have a problem with the concept of continuing this for purposes of clarification and exactness. But I think you run into these situations where in code, do you want it to be written in such a way that procedurally you want examples listed? Okay, if there's some sort of extremist action in this town, PD is restrained from acting against it with whatever weaponry until the council gives permission to use this weapon?
No, I'm not trying to put any...
So then I don't know why the current language in the ordinance is not good enough. That's what I'm saying. It's really a matter of how worried you are about an extreme situation presenting itself here where our PD, which is a pretty mild PD, by the way, with respect to use of force, that's meant as a compliment. Be honest, Chief, was this whole effort here to just maintain compliance with state law?
Correct.
And you enlisted the help of our city attorney?
We've had...
So this is really more of an academic affair.
This went to the city attorney.
Okay.
This has been through the California Chiefs of Police
That's how I looked at it when I was
attorneys.
reading it.
I'm sorry. It's been through the California Chief of Police attorneys. I've had meetings with several chiefs and city attorneys. A lot of the language has been drafted from Bay Area towns, San Bruno, San Francisco, Sacramento. A lot of agencies that are working under consent decrees that have to go even farther because they have civilian oversights. So that's what a lot of this language is from. Again, we have to have it before council by May of 2022. And I would just point out to council that we've had these weapons at the police department since before I was here. So I believe 1999 is when we acquired 1033 weapons, and they've been in the department. And in my 20 years, not one time has the weapon been fired. So we haven't actively used them, but we need them for the world that we live in right now. So you're asking about the necessity of why it's a necessity. We have to have a long rifle just for, God help us, if we get into a situation in a school, we got to be able to cover the hallways. That's what their purpose is for.
I wasn't I wasn't questioning the necessity.
I was just on that number one, in case that's, I understand that point one that you were referring to. That was what I took, was that they were referring to that. That is what is necessary about those items that we have. So that's what I was talking.
Well,
Thank you.
there may be times where you need military equipment use, but the way this is written, saying there's no alternative to military equipment use, to me, that's also overbroad. It may be true in some cities, but I don't think it's true in the city of Mount Shasta. If this is a template ordinance typically, template ordinances can be fashioned, massaged for particular circumstances and locations.
Which is why it went to John Kinney to make it specific to Mount Shasta.
Yeah, and all I'm asking
I'm saying that,
is,
yes, we did get that, but we did send it off to him to make it.
I'm asking council that
I understand.
that council provide me an opportunity to talk with staff about this, because I haven't gone through all the points, and see if perhaps I'm raising some good points that whereby the ordinance, the draft ordinance ought to be modified before we actually do a final vote on it. And if that is 2 weeks from now, it works fine. If it's 4 weeks from now, it still falls within the time frame, because you've already met that May introduction time limit.
To the chair, I was going to ask Kathy where we were. Yeah. Where are we in the process of this? Do you remember, Kathy? Have we
need
opened
to
up for
open it
public
to
comment?
Yeah, we kind of devolved into conversation there a little bit.
I was going to say, John, we haven't heard from you as far as any
It's
clarifying
on
questions.
Public comment.
Okay. So let me open a public comment. Is there anybody here in the audience who would like to speak on this matter? Anybody online, Kathy? One moment, folks. We're working out a new system here.
Yes. Our first speaker is Betty.
Hi, Betty. There you are. Wow, we get to see you.
And I'm not at my best today because I've been in a lot of pain, so sorry for the face. I agree with Tim. I think it's really important that we get it totally clarified as to what the meaning is of the ordinance. We can't go back. We've had this situation in state issues and formerly in city council issues where things were decided, or I should probably say city issues, where things were decided and they were really unclear, and then we lived to regret it. So I think it's worth our while to make sure, as Tim has specified, that this be very clear, where there's no misunderstanding, and it doesn't hurt to go back and ask Kenny if it's all right. I don't see what the big argument is over this. I have long been concerned about the militarization of city police departments.
Okay, now the link works.
What's going on? Somebody needs to mute Gino. Like I said, I've long been concerned about the militarization of city police departments. And although, we're a small city and it might not happen, it could happen with a change. And it could happen with a change in so many areas, not just with whomever the police chief is, but what's going on state and federal wise. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Kathy, anybody else?
One moment.
Nobody else?
Bear with us, folks.
believe he's clarifying with the folks on the line that they don't do or don't want to give public comment.
Ah.
No more.
No more.
No more public comment.
We have nobody else who wants to speak on this item, so I'll bring it back to council for conversation. John, do we dare?
I'm ready to make a motion and just approve it as is. I don't share the same concerns. I'm not worried about the police being militarized. Half my customers have a better arsenal than you anyways. Trust me, I hear about it all the time. Okay, so you guys getting some guns and not using them, not a big deal to me. I don't understand the concerns over here. John Kenny's already looked at it, you've looked at it, said you sent it to the chief of police attorneys as well, or whatever it was. Yeah, it's good enough for me. It's just motion and good on it.
Okay, so I'll make a motion. Kathy, it looks like there's two parts to this. There's the pull from the consent agenda, which would be a resolution of the City Council of the City of Mount Shasta approving Section 706 of the Mount Shasta Police Department Policy Manual, and that would be CCR-22-7, title only.
Second.
Can we have a roll call vote, Kathy, so we're kind of...
Councilmember Redmond,
What are we voting on?
approval of resolution CCR 22-07, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Mount Shasta approving section 706 of the Mount Shasta Police Department Policy Manual.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stacklet.
Aye.
Councilmember Stearns.
Nay.
Mayor Pro Tem Clure.
Aye.
Mayor Collins.
Aye.
Do we need the second?
Yeah, so that's a little unclear to me, but I'll move to approve the first reading of the addition of a new chapter to 2.80 to the Mount Shasta Municipal Code regarding police acquisition and use of military equipment to a second reading by title only.
Second.
Councilmember Redmond.
Aye.
Councilmember Stacklet.
Aye.
Councilmember Stearns.
Nay.
Mayor Pro Tem Clure.
Aye.
Mayor Collins.
Aye. And we've had a request for before we move on to the next agenda item, if we can take a 5-minute bathroom break. We will be right back. Thank you. bring the meeting back to order, and we are going to move to agenda item number 11, the first reading of CCO-22- we get the number on the second reading, opting in to the Siskiyou County Integrated Solid Waste Management, the regional agency's edible food recovery ordinance. And Finance Director Terrell, would you introduce this, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor and Council. The ordinance coming before you regarding edible food recovery is following in line with the regional solid waste management group out of for all of us in the county. And in order for us to hopefully get some funding to handle things like edible food recovery, we have to go through these hoops in order to make sure that we are then going to be able to apply for funding, and to also know that we wouldn't be levied fines or penalties related to not doing this resolution. Fortunately, in the city of Mount Shasta, edible food recovery, there's not an entity large enough within the city that would require having to do edible food recovery. However, that doesn't mean that sometime in the future we won't have some place that is large enough, or that the state would change the rules about what size entities have to do edible food recovery. So that's why that has come before you tonight, just basically following in the footsteps of the other entities within the county to get our ordinance in place, and so we're not going down the road of having, even though there's not a particular entity within the city that would have to do edible food recovery, just not having the plan and not going through these hoops could subject us to penalties and fines, even if we don't have any.
And just a bigger picture on this, the bigger picture is we need to opt in to the rural exemption that says that we don't have to comply with food waste and green waste collection until 2026.
Right.
Okay.
Any clarifying questions? City council members? Anybody in the audience like to speak on this issue? And anybody online?
We need Jeopardy music.
No.
We need Jeopardy music in between.
Let me bring it back to council then for discussion. Any discussion about this, or as this is just a first reading and it's clear we're opting in to opt out? Wait, that doesn't make any sense.
Just keeping ourselves from getting fined.
Right.
Yeah, keeping ourselves from getting fined. That's it. If there's no questions, is there a motion?
I'll move approval or move this proposed ordinance of the City of Mount Shasta opting in to the Siskiyou County Integrated Solid Waste Management Regional Agency's Edible Food Recovery Ordinance by title only to a second reading.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, measure carries. We're moving on to agenda item 12, the water rate study. Again, Finance Director, would you
Yes,
introduce
thank
this,
you,
please?
Mayor and Council. Before you tonight is the first step for a new water utility rate update, in which case we would have to go through the Proposition 218 process in order for these utility rate changes to become effective for July 1, 2022. I know our PACE engineer is online, And if you have particular questions for him, he's willing to come in and answer any technical questions you may have. We did have an ad hoc committee comprised of Tessa and John Stackleth, and perhaps they may want to speak to this as well. But the rates are relatively low. In fact, if you were to look at probably the last page, or next to the last page of the report, Mount Shasta's water rates will remain, even after these small increases, will still remain the lowest of any of the other rates that were presented here on the monthly water bill comparison page. So I would respectfully ask that you adopt the resolution for the water utility rate study and direct staff to continue on in initiating the Proposition 218 notice of proposed water rate changes.
Okay, through the chair. So that my comments are in addition to Muriel as a member of the ad hoc committee, and feel free to add on to what I say, Tessa. So the PACE representative, what was his name again?
Curtis.
Curtis, yeah, great guy, and really did a wonderful job explaining all the details regarding our water situation. Speaking off the top of my head, he made it clear that the objectives of this rate increase were to maintain a 25% reserve with respect to operating, the operational costs of the water system, and two, maintain a plus $1 million reserve for improvements, capital improvements to the water system. And that we needed to incorporate some expenses that had not been factored in before. Apparently, we have not hired a water system operator, and we might, and the cost of doing that has to be factored into the cost of running the water system. Inflation is higher, so that was factored into this rate increase. There are some capital expenses with respect to the projects that are upcoming. Not all the projects are entirely covered by grants. They are largely covered by grants, but there are, at the very least, there's $395,000, I believe, for the Pine Street water project required match there to finish, to be able to fund that project. So it's not that there's no choice in the matter, but the goals are to have those cushions, the 25% operating reserve and the $1 million plus capital reserve, capital improvement reserve. And given the great unknown of the rate of inflation, I think this is a very wise and prudent course, 50-cent increase for base rate for most users. And then the rate increases for higher users is also relatively mild, especially compared with other municipalities. Another positive thing that he did bring up is that we're nearing the end of a 10-year master water plan, which includes, the previous projects that are completed and near completion, which includes the one heading down South Mount Shasta Boulevard. The Oak Street, Orem Street, and Pine Street projects are all part of this master plan. And then the last segment of that master plan would be the water tanks, which looks like we have some positive news on that front with respect to property situation. Okay, so that would complete the master plan started back in 2010. And so I find that really a good sign that the city started a major project, and it looks like we're going to finish it. And another one of the costs added here was setting up a new master plan, the cost of setting up a new master plan going forward. So on the negative side, I asked him, well, you know, Paul Reuter said we need to replace 75,000 linear feet of pipe, water pipe, and so what's the percentage of the pipe that all these projects cover? And I said, oh, I don't know, 20 to 40% maybe. So in other words, there's a lot more to do. So that's the one negative takeaway I had. There's lots of old water pipes in Mount Shasta. So there you go. I do support this wholeheartedly, this rate increase.
I just wanted to add that the process was extremely thorough. Curtis was very professional. The ad hoc committee was very thorough in the process. He brought back a few scenarios for us to look over, and this one that's being presented to council was unanimously favored due to all of the factors that Councilman Stackfleth presented. So I'm also in favor of this.
Any other questions for staff? Questions from the audience then for public comment? Anybody online?
If there's any members of the audience that would like to speak during public comment, please utilize the raise hand feature now. There are no remote commenters.
Well, let's bring it back to council for discussion. Nope, all good. Yes, sir.
The pipes need to be replaced.
Yeah, I get it. And is there a motion to move that water rate study?
Motion to approve, where are we here? The water rate study as, are we moving to approve anything? I don't see.
I would say this, this part down in here.
To proceed with the proposed resolution adopting the water utility rate study update and authorizing staff to initiate Prop 218 public notice of proposed water rate changes. By title only.
I'll second.
And the resolution is?
60-22-0.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, we'll move to the last agenda item. Discussion and possible action on the response to the Beautification Committee letter. And City Manager.
Yes, so in your packets and when we had the false start on the last city council meeting, we had some comments from the Beautification Committee, some things that they would like addressed. From all that I've heard, this is a really effective, extremely productive committee. And going through their list of things that they'd like to take care of, a lot of their concerns around Parker Plaza and disrepair and cleanliness and removal of graffiti on an ongoing basis and graffiti removal in other locations in the city. So in regards to Parker Plaza itself, Teresa has worked on putting together an RFP for regular maintenance services at Parker Plaza and for graffiti removal and just basic upkeep that we will put out there in terms of graffiti removal, services around the city. We need to check into what's available and see, what kind of budget we have moving into the next year, along with one of their requests is replacing trash cans that are pretty expensive. They went after a pretty significant grant and weren't successful. We'll be looking at potential opportunities for grants on our end and potentially a combination of budget to see if we might be able to carry this off. This is all stuff that we need to take a look at. The last piece is wanting to monitor, well, first, also replacement of lights in some of the planters and removal of plants. And there was a desire for cameras to be able to monitor these locations to be able to catch who's doing this. The trick is who is going to take the time, given that we're short-staffed, to monitor this. One of the things that we could look at is a pretty low cost as opposed to a high-tech system like Eufy that will send out an alert at certain hours if there's activity in that location, and then, those couple of hits, then we can take a look at and see if anything's actually happening. That may be a low-cost way to get at this, but we're evaluating these other pieces. So we're doing our best to address these issues, and I think for sure we can address a number of them off the bat, and as we get into the budget process, address more of them.
Let's open it up to public comment then, please. Thank you.
I'm Nancy Van Susteren. I'm a member of the Beautification Committee. After reading the staff report generated by our letter, I just want you to know that we're thrilled that the city is moving forward with an RFP for Parker Plaza. We are pleased that the graffiti cleaning will be included in the Parker Plaza RFP, but we hope that the graffiti on the other city-owned downtown property, which is more egregious than that of Parker Plaza, would be removed sooner rather than later. Policing graffiti isn't exactly what we had in mind. We hoped that the city could hire someone to remove graffiti a couple times a year. In regards to the trash cans, the wooden rings that surround the 55-gallon drums currently used for trash cans were made at least 25 years ago, and they have definitely shown their age. The Opportunity Center designed and made them. We've been working on trash can replacements for 4 or 5 years. At no time during that time was there a grant that applied to purchase of things like trash cans. Most grants are capital improvements. Our recommendations that in the handout I just gave you, go over that a little bit. So for the downtown, we chose concrete trash cans. They're 53 gallons. They're made of concrete. They're very sturdy. They can't be moved. They're kind of, they're just what we thought would be good. And then we also included the purchase of 4 recycling containers. And then city staff indicated they were concerned about the weight of them because they would need to be moved during events, special events. So we included a lighter weight trash can to be brought out during special events. So currently we have 18 55-gallon drums with the surround thing in the downtown area. We are suggesting that we purchase 22 so that we can add some to Chestnut Street and maybe 1 or 2 on South Mount Shasta Boulevard and Lake Street. And then after we came up with our suggestions, we consulted with the Summit Disposal Company, and they approved what we selected. Apparently, the cans we currently have are very difficult to maneuver and remove trash from. So they're all in favor of it.
about that for an ending?
Is that it? Oh.
Please, go, continue if you...
Oh, thank you. So we also included a request from DEAC to purchase some doggy poo bags, receptacles, which is also attached. We hope that the City Council will consider purchasing replacements as soon as possible rather than waiting for a grant opportunity. Our current proposal is less than $25,000. Of course, the number, size, and types of receptacles can be adjusted. We'd be pleased to work with the city staff to make any necessary changes. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about our selections and our processes, and thank you very much for considering our requests.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody online?
If we have any members of the remote audience that would like to speak during public comment, please utilize the raise hand feature now. We have no remote commenters.
Then let's bring it back to council for discussion. This is just informational only. There's no voting on this issue. I have something to say. I sent some other options to, and all the bombarding of emails that come from suppliers that are attempting to sell. There were a few that just happened to show up the last few days about trash cans and enclosures, and there were just some other options to consider, and I forward them on to the city manager. And I'm sure he'll send them on to you to see what you all think. They have recycling and traditional trash as well in containers that were able to be removed but with traditional bins on the inside, but you all have done a lot of work and...
Well, these have removable bins.
Right.
Included with them. And in our report, the green ones also do, but I did not do that because when we have special events.
Again, all I did was just send some more options to the city manager. He'll discuss them with you, and I'm sure we'll move forward.
Mayor Collins, if I may, we do have a late public comment.
Oh, sure.
And our speaker will be Johanna.
Hello, Johanna. Wait, do we see?
Okay, can you hear me?
Ah, yes, we can.
Okay, it's hard. It took me a hot second to figure out how to get from the one screen to the chat screen. Anyway, I just wanted to say that I like the idea, what Todd brought up about having cameras enforce some of that stuff with people doing damage. And will that be enough to allow like code enforcement to enforce things with that, or is it more just a deterrent?
Johanna, Johanna, please continue.
Oh, okay. I was just, that was pretty much all I wanted to say on that. So I just thought that was a good idea, and we should use our technology. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As this is an informational piece, Chief, you want to address her issue?
Sure. So
we're a little out of bounds here.
Depending on what the camera system is, there's two different possibilities. One, like we had talked with the park, you could put up a system that is monitored 24/7 in dispatch. I don't know what it would come with as far as needing maybe Wi-Fi remote or something like that. The second option could be like cameras that are recorded, where they're going to see that the camera's up there. You got to worry about vandalism to the cameras, and you probably have to look at businesses such as Napa and across the street over at the Vets Club maybe to be able to use their facilities for cameras. But if they had a recording facility, at least allow officers to go in and view the video to see if we could identify somebody through the camera. That's what I would see on two camera options.
So there is a low-tech camera solution that's maybe $150. You know, if you mount it in the right place, even if it's damaged, what it does is it doesn't require constant monitoring. is if you're running it and you're activating at certain times of the day when vandalism is going to occur, you are going to have the video image of that person committing the damage, and if they pull that camera down, they're still on your video image on your cell phone. That can then be used as evidence, and if they are damaged, they're not expensive to replace. Now, the next piece of this is the graffiti removal mentioned for the rest of the town. The chief just mentioned to me that community service, people that need to fulfill community service for the city, we just need to inform the court and we can have them do that, and we have high-tech graffiti removal equipment on staff.
And if I may interject, one of these tiny little areas that I know about, they make video cameras that can be on during certain times that have directors that if with an infrared profile that's a person, not a dog or a cat, they can do things like turn on a light or announce a statement to, hey, the park is closed. One of those things that are deterrents that so somebody doesn't have to be monitoring. But of course, all that footage is sent to the cloud immediately and can be reviewed later for any potential prosecution. Any more conversation or input on this?
We do have another public comment.
And those options are pretty low cost, actually.
We do have another public comment.
Oh, okay, thanks.
And this will be Betty.
Hi again. Yeah, I think that cameras are a really good idea. Not to belabor the issue or call for sympathy, but I have, as you know, on a number of occasions complained about smoking in Parker Plaza, and the mayor went out and talked to that person. I haven't been able to walk or anything for about 4 months, so I haven't been observing what's going on there, which is probably why nobody said anything, because I'm not saying anything. But even if the cameras aren't monitored, at least the information is there. So if someone like me complains about smoking in Parker Plaza, this shouldn't be just about graffiti. This should be about other violations of law. And that one particular violation of law went on for quite a number of months. So I think this would help to curtail that as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Through the chair. So looking at the full scope of the beautification critique, seems to me that the best approach is to categorize, compartmentalize the different problems and come up with solutions. Clearly, the trash cans are worn out and do need to be replaced. To me, this is all about upgrading on a small scale compared to the water system, right, where it's millions of dollars. This is, for instance, spending $25,000 on trash can upgrade is less than 1% of our budget, substantially. It's about 1% of our reserve, a little bit over 1% of reserve. I think it behooves us, with the help of our two volunteer organizations or committees regarding downtown upgrades, to come up with spending plans for improvements that can be factored into next year's budget. Although I do understand that beautification committee wants to get the garbage can thing handled soon. So if that's the case, I don't think too many people would be upset about spending some sort of money on removing the really bad garbage cans. But so that's one area. There's problems with these planters, whether it's the upright ones or the planters on Castle Street. To me, it sounds like beautification and possibly DEAC need to come up with some sort of vision for where things need to go, and that might be more money if you're going to really improve Castle Street, right? So security, it's another package. all told, probably under $100,000. We were expecting $1.5 million in the reserve. I think we can factor that into next year's budget and possibly a little money sooner. So, yeah, I think most people here want to see downtown improved. The bigger improvement would be coming up with a sidewalk package that's uniform versus the hodgepodge sidewalk design we have now in the downtown area. That's more money, but ultimately something that should be looked at. So anyhow, those are my comments. I do think we should move forward and spend a little money on these things. Oh, and then we have to come up with a maintenance program. I don't know if should that be Public Works or should it be a contractor?
I didn't catch that last piece because of the...
So then there needs to be maintenance, right?
Yes.
And the question is, do we hire an outside party, which beautification is hinting at very directly, or use Public Works to do the cleanup, the graffiti cleanup, et cetera? But right now we're looking at an RFP for Parker Plaza, ongoing maintenance.
Yes, and if we can, with the rest of the city for graffiti removal, if we're able to use community service folks, that's helpful, and we'll see how they do. The use of folks that need to do community service for the city and making that their mission. And we have the tools for graffiti removal on, in our arsenal.
Can I just say something about the RFP? We currently have someone who treats Parker Plaza once a month and gets paid $60.
Okay.
So we're looking at something bigger than that. And especially the high pressure hoses cleaned up. We offer to do that as the beautification committee, but the Public Works will listen to the bigger ones to do that. So that's why
Just a point of clarification on the existing contract. I did take a look at it, and it's not very comprehensive in terms of what the agreement is, and there's no timelines. So it really, if we do need to update a contract.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm all for this, but I think part of the bigger picture in maintaining this is we got to do something about all the homeless filth hanging out downtown. Otherwise, all our migratory homeless that are about to come back here because it's the end of March are just going to see anything like this as a new canvas for graffiti, for stickers, for everything. Or we start cleaning Parker Plaza around the little island there between Ace and the Crystal Store where the viewer and the water fountain is. I mean, it seems like every day of the summer that's somebody's living room, 5 to 10 people at a time, making that their living room. And if we just clean that up, all they're seeing is like, oh, hey, look at that. Fresh mess to make. That's my concern. We got to do something about the homeless because it isn't too many of the Mount Shasta youth. It isn't the locals. It isn't the citizens doing all this. It's the homeless because they just have free reign right now anywhere they want. And all this cleanup is going to be great, but not if it's just in less than a year. We're back to having it look like it does because they just get to tag. I mean, cameras are not going to deter them. They're homeless. We got to go find them then, and that's not going to happen. And then what, cited and released? I mean, that's not going to help anything either. So, but as far as cleaning up, yes, we got to clean it up, but we got to make sure that just the degenerates that live on our sidewalks don't get at it. That's my concern.
Thank you, John.
Otherwise, we're just doing this again in a year, right? 2 years, whatever.
Anybody else? Tessa? No?
Please come to the podium, Mike, so the audience can hear you. Thank you.
So in terms of graffiti, what we're going to recommend, there are clear treatments that you can put on something that makes it easier to remove graffiti, and that is one of our recommendations, but I didn't include it.
Something to help with spray paint and all that, just as it goes on, it comes off easier with
Yeah,
thinner?
yeah, all of the murals downtown have that kind of coating on it.
Okay.
So but there are different kinds of coatings for different kinds of surfaces.
Okay, because I'm just thinking about the graffiti that Berryville got tagged with on the
Yeah.
side of their building, that just didn't need to happen, but obviously
Yeah,
they couldn't
that
clean
was-
it, they just had to paint over it. And now they gotta
Yeah.
redo their whole mural that way.
Yeah, that's bad, but I don't think they treated that whole side.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you, all staff, for this report. We are going to move on to the next agenda. There were no outside meetings, so we will go to future agenda items and meetings. Anybody have anything they want to put on the agenda or take off?
To the chair, I would like to add the beautification request for immediate monies to help clean up downtown.
Would you like to include some garbage cans?
I would love to include some garbage cans.
All right, so I'll second that.
Last year or earlier this year, there was a suggestion that there be a citywide cleanup weekend. And I don't know if that needs to come back to city council. We already said, yes, we would be supportive of that. Maybe we can hear from staff at the appropriate time on that in terms of scheduling.
So I'm in favor of that also. It's something that disappeared. It was somewhat moving along and might be something that beautification spearheads, but I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
A sprinkling sort of thing.
John? Okay. Well, if there's nothing else on the agenda,
Well, I'm actually going to throw a curveball here.
it's okay, I'm used to it.
So the whole militarization ordinance to me was about reporting on use, and it was more oriented towards use of weaponry, and that's why I was in favor of moving forward with that language. Tim's concern is that it's not clear about, one of his concerns is that it's not clear about the acquisition of military weapons by the police. It's not clear whether they have to get permission first. I would be in favor of creating an ordinance or part to be added to that explicitly states that further acquisition of military equipment must first be approved by City Council, with the possible exception of extreme circumstances where they need to get something. Are you interested in that?
That's what I was trying to convey, that I thought this ordinance might be amended to include that.
Why don't we work on that amendment going forward as something additional, okay? All right, so is that clear, staff? We're going to PD? Okay.
And if that is all, folks, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
I'm gonna be in late tomorrow, because I gotta get that tomorrow. Okay. When the 6th. Yep. I'll just put this as